When I was a kid, my mom would sometimes drag me to a rickety old theater that would show old black and white movies. She'd order up the popcorn and we'd snuggle into our seats to watch Cary Grant or Bette Davis do their thing on the silver screen. And to this day, I still love old movies. I'd rather watch an Alfred Hitchcock or John Huston movie than the latest Transformers flick, hands down. But am I alone? Do old movies even matter anymore? Do they hold up? Can they even be, gasp, entertaining? I'm Paul Lacey, filling in for Adam Holtz, and welcome to the Plugged In Show. We'll be exploring these questions and more through the prism of 3 black and white movies that we've reviewed recently: To Kill a Mockingbird, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, and Seven Samurai. And then, before we get too nostalgic, I'll talk with Emily Chow about the new social media features on Spotify. Are they good? Bad? Well, like a lot of things in our world, the answer isn't necessarily black and white. Old movies, they are black and white. And to talk about these classic films, I'm joined by fellow old movie aficionado Bob Hoose, our stellar plugged-in intern Caleb Gottry, and for the first time ever on our podcast, Brad Eckleberry, our new managing editor. Welcome.
Hey, guys.
Dun, dun, dun. We should have more of a drum roll.
That's right. There you go.
And so, in honor of you, Brad, I decided to break the ice this morning with a Batman question, because you're a huge Batman fan, as are most of the people around this table, Caleb accepted. So I wanted to ask everybody here, and we'll start with you, Brett, who is your favorite all-time Batman villain?
Yeah, well, thanks. So it is very tempting to go with the Joker, particularly the Mark Hamill voiced animated version of the character from the 90s animated series and some other media. But I'll go in a little bit of different direction with a villain that I particularly enjoy, and that is Dr. Jonathan Crane, a.k.a. the Scarecrow. So I've always really liked the Scarecrow, always really found him interesting.
You liked the Scarecrow?
Well, in terms of how
Invite
you
him over for
like
dinner.
a villain. Yeah, you
Hang
know.
out with him.
Let him terrify
He's a nice guy when you get to know him, right? But I think that one of the things that makes Batman villains interesting is they often reflect a piece of Batman's persona in some way. And so the Scarecrow obviously uses fear, as does Batman. So where Batman strikes fear into the hearts of criminals, the Scarecrow strikes fear into the hearts of innocents and the weak. So he's
everybody.
He's a pretty despicable. He's a pretty despicable character. So which makes it all the more satisfying when Batman comes out on top. That's who I would say. I like the Scarecrow. I think he brings out a lot in Batman that makes things very, very interesting.
That's a really good pick. I wish I had thought of that, actually. But all right, Mr. Hoose?
Well, my son and I had a discussion much like this, actually, where we sat down and talked about the villains and who was their favorite, and his was the Riddler. And I was going to say that today, but then I realized, you know what? I think my favorite is Catwoman.
Really?
Yeah. And for a number of reasons. One is the red, white, and blue all-American male side of me. She's pretty. But also, the thing I like about Catwoman as the villain is that, yes, she does bad stuff. Yes, she's willing to steal anything. But underneath, you sort of see this core of goodness. There's something good about her underneath that even she doesn't want to admit sometimes, but that's what Batman sees too. So
yeah, it's interesting. When you both talk about these characters, I go to the Arkham games, the series of Arkham games, because both of them are really fleshed out in those games, and it gives you new dimensions to those. I mean, check out the Plugged In review for sure, because they have issues, but it really is interesting. So, all right, Caleb.
Yes, as you alluded to, not a Batman fan, but my good buddy is, and he would likely say the Joker. He has sat me down and explained to me in detail why the Joker is the best villain, because he's not like Catwoman. He has no good in him. He is so mentally unstable that he cannot be anything but a villain. And I think that's what makes him a great villain.
Yeah.
in a lot of people's minds.
He's so opposite of Batman in
Yeah.
every way, thematically,
Yeah.
visually, just everything.
Yeah.
So.
You know, the one thing about Batman is that one of the things that makes him so popular in our culture is that he has such a good array of villains. And I would think that the Joker would be top of the heap.
Joker
right?
has his own movie.
Joker has his own movie. He has plenty of Oscars.
You talk about
Yeah.
psychotic.
Oh, yeah.
The Joker movie.
Yeah, and for me, I think I'm going to go with Two-Face. Harvey Dent. For those who do not know the backstory of Harvey Dent, he was this politician, and depending on what Batman thing you're watching, how good or how slimy he was sort of varies from depiction to depiction. But he was burned really badly on one side of his face, and so he turns into this bad guy. But all of his decisions are based on the flip of a coin. It's all completely random. And the thing that I really love about this character, not that I would invite him over for dinner, but the idea of that sense of randomness, that sense of chance, and that really tragic pathos of the character. The fact that he was this good guy who was literally scarred. I always think of Aaron Eckhart's version of him in The Dark Knight. That really brought the character home to me, and I think you can't go wrong with Two-Face.
You'd feel comfortable inviting half of him over for dinner.
Or for half the dinner anyway.
And take away his coin.
That's right.
Right.
Just about the time he starts to flip a coin to say, well, that's dessert. Let's go.
So it's interesting because in a way, when you look at Two-Face and a lot of his treatments, he is really a black and white character. You know, one side of him is dressed in black, one side of him is dressed in white. So we'll use that as a convenient segue into our discussion about black and white movies. We have been starting to review some older movies and some classic movies. And the movies we're going to be talking about this morning are three of the all-time greats, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I have seen all these movies. I really enjoy them. But when we reviewed them for Plugged In, I think that there were some surprises that we found in them as well. So why don't we go ahead and start with you, Caleb? To Kill a Mockingbird. This is a 1963 movie with Gregory Peck. Can you tell us a little bit about what is in it?
Of course. It's very well based on the book. So if you've read the book, the movie
Harper Lee.
is very similar. Atticus Finch is a lawyer. He has two kids, Scout and Jem. He's assigned by the judge to take on the case of Tom Robinson. Tom Robinson is a black male who is accused of raping Mayella Ewell, the son of Bob Ewell, who is probably one of the worst men in this movie, in a lot of movies. So he takes on this case, and it's a constant discussion between him and Bob Ewell, between him and the judge, between him and his kids about what is justice, what is fairness, what is equality in this time that's not very equal.
Yeah. So do you watch a lot of old movies? I mean, was this sort of an unusual thing for you to push you to review this movie?
I've definitely watched, like, the classics, I would say. Like, we watch It's a Wonderful Life when it comes on TV around Thanksgiving to prep for Christmas. You know, so I do like getting introduced to old movies. I used to think black and white movies were super boring. But as I became more of a writer, I began to appreciate the more story-driven plots rather than like spectacle that's in so many movies nowadays.
Oh, that's interesting. I definitely want to come back to that boring thing. But was there anything that surprised you in this movie? You had not seen it before, had you?
I had not.
So were you surprised by the themes, the way the movie moved, anything that struck you?
I was surprised how closely it kept to the book. So in the book, you just hear a lot of things from Atticus's perspective and Atticus's kid's perspective. You never really see any of it happen. It's all hearsay in the courtroom. It's all the judge comes late at night and tells Atticus what happened. And they don't really change that for the movie. You still get a lot more dialogue than you do showing what actually happened, which is an interesting choice because I feel like a lot of movies based on books will go to another extent and go to actually show what happened. Whereas To Kill a Mockingbird really stayed true to the text.
Yeah.
And I found it interesting, too, that they also took the time to include a lot of the relationships, the family relationships, which adds such a great texture to the story. I mean, they could have in a film version just stuck to the trial,
Right.
and just stuck to, like you were saying, the nuts and bolts, the facts, just the facts, ma'am. But they added all the characters and the family members and the kids and how those relationships impact Atticus and all the different aspects of the case itself from the outside.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when you're talking about this movie in particular, you are given probably one of the greatest American heroes you find on screen. Atticus Finch is really this towering figure of justice who does the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why the movie has lasted so long. Speaking of heroes, when we look at The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, it stars John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart, who are these titans of classic cinema, right? John Wayne is, for a lot of people, the prototypical American hero.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about what goes on in this movie.
Well, in short, it's about the wildness of the frontier and the civilization that is trying to tame it, that's encroaching upon it. So, a quintessential Western, in a lot of ways, but it's what that movie did beyond that concept, that tried and true concept that really impressed me. As you mentioned, John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart, these ideologies, the wildness of the frontier and civilization, modernity, if I can say that right, modernity, it's really represented by John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart. So Jimmy Stewart plays a lawyer from back east named Ransom, and he is coming out to the frontier. He's new to this frontier town of Shinbone. Great name for a Western town.
Great
name.
I live in Shinbone.
That's right. That's right. So he is coming to the frontier while John Wayne plays a character named Tom, who is a seasoned cowboy. He is born and bred on the frontier. Ransom, the Jimmy Stewart character, believes in the law. Tom, the John Wayne character, believes that in the Wild West, a man solves his own problems, mainly with a six-shooter, right? So the two men and their ideologies really clash throughout the film, and it doesn't help that they are both kind of vying for the affections of a local woman named Hallie. That always adds a little bit of conflict.
Exactly.
Right? But they're still tied together by the threat of the titular Liberty Valance, who is a black-hearted outlaw who is terrorizing the town. So they reluctantly team up to help the residents of Shinbone try to break free from the clutches of the outlaw.
Interesting. Yeah, just the names, not only Shinbone, but when you're talking about Ransom and Liberty, those are kind of interesting names that the movie chose to use to represent some of these characters.
Absolutely.
It's a great Western, by the way. I mean, it really is one of the best Westerns because of all those textures that he was just talking about, but also just the characters themselves. And by the time you get to the end of the film, it lands so different from the way most Westerns would land.
Yeah, that's interesting
Exactly.
because we actually talked, Brett, you and I had actually talked a little bit about how the movie ended.
Absolutely. So the movie has, for those who haven't seen it, it has kind of a unique framing device that's built around a big flashback in the middle of the movie, right? So it starts off in the present in the time of this movie being early 1900s America.
Right. Just that transition between
Just that
wildness, the Wild West, into civilization.
Exactly right. So that's the present, but it flashes back about 25 years, and that's really the meat of the movie. So Ransom in the present is recounting the story of what happened. He is known as the man who shot Liberty Valance, and he's recounting this legend to a couple of listeners. And we find out that the legend might be a little bit different than what we've been led to believe. So we get to see that in the flashback. By the end of the movie, as Bob mentioned, we return to the present, and it does go on a little bit farther than the typical Western or even the typical action movie where the bad guy is defeated, the town is saved, everyone feels great.
The good guy rides into the sunset.
The good guy rides into the
Credits
sunset,
roll.
and the credits roll, right, with the sweeping score coming in. It lingers on intentionally for about 15, 20 minutes more, really to chew over this idea of civilization and the frontier in the intervening years since Liberty Valance was defeated, Ransom has become this popular figure. Shinbone has become an example of civilization. It's safe, it's tame, all of these good things.
They changed the name to Denver. I mean, it was a crazy thing.
Right. But all these things that you would think the movie would want us to be happy about, but instead we're left with this kind of melancholy where it's almost like something was lost along the way, something that might have been good within the frontier.
And the movie gives you a chance to sort of ruminate on that. And that's
does.
really fascinating to me. And
does.
When we talk about To Kill a Mockingbird, when we talk about Liberty Valance, it does seem like these old movies give a little bit of space. They don't move quite as fast, but maybe that's intentional. Would you say
well,
that?
that's the great thing about film, to be honest. The films that step up to sort of preach at me and point a finger in my face, those are the films I usually hate. Films that do this, where they set up an idea, a concept, a story, and then they say, what do you think about this? Those are great films.
Yeah,
that's what makes it a
absolutely.
classic.
And they set up two characters with those viewpoints that you come to care for both and you come to understand both. So it really does lay it out for you.
In a way, you come to weep for both.
Exactly. And it lets you make your decision after it doesn't preach to you. So
That's really interesting. So for our third movie, Seven Samurai, not only is it black and white, it is also a foreign movie made by the very famous, very legendary Japanese director Kurosawa.
Right. And it's 3.5 hours long.
3.5. You lucky person. Aren't you happy that you got to review it?
Yeah.
But it really has become very, very, it's one of the most famous foreign movies, I would say, in sort of kind of American cinema history, if that makes sense.
In fact, I think for decades after it came out, it influenced American film.
Right. Well, when you think about like The Magnificent Seven,
Yes. Right.
even a movie like The Three Amigos, it stemmed from The Seven Samurai. So tell me a little bit about this movie. Does it deserve its high rating?
Okay. Well, I can start out there and say yes. That doesn't mean it's a perfect film, nor is it a film that necessarily every family should go see. But it does deserve its reputation just because of what the director did with it and the choices he made and the innovations he brought forth because of this film or through this film.
When you speak about innovations, well, like, give us an example.
Well, okay, first of all, let me tell you what it's about.
Okay.
It's about this group of samurai. It's in the latter part of the 16th century, and things are going on in Japan. It's this transitional moment in time. The Civil War has sort of caused the shogunate system to sort of start collapsing, and all these samurai are out of work. They don't have bosses anymore, and some of them are doing some nasty things. So it's essentially about this group of 7 samurai that come together to defend a small farming village that's being attacked by bandits. And these guys, they have a lot of different choices, but they're sort of unmoored, but they come together as a group to do the honorable thing, even though by doing that honorable thing, they're sort of wiping out their former lifestyle. So it's one of those, again, multi-layered kind of films. But getting back to what you asked about, what were some of the technical advances? He did something that American films hadn't even thought of, really, and that was a multi-camera shoot. And it was because of necessity. So many times we see in modern film, for example, it's the independent films that do some of the more creative work.
Sure.
Because they're limited. They're in this structure and they don't have any money or whatever. Well, it was the same sort of thing with him. He didn't have any money. This film was going over budget by gazillions of yen or whatever it was. It was this out of control. In fact, they almost canceled the film at one point because it was so much over budget. Wow. But he had this great big scene with a fire, and they had to actually burn the set down. And he knew he couldn't rebuild the set. He didn't have the money. So he had to do a multi-camera shot, and then which ended up being this wonderful construct and all these different images that he was able to capture that nobody had seen someone do that before, but it was out of necessity. So it was little things like that that just made this film so much more, appealing, especially to an audience that liked film. And really, as you said, there are so many different elements. You can watch this film and you can say, wait a minute, didn't they do something like that in Star Wars? And the answer is yes. So, I mean, there's so many different elements that directors have pulled from since.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things about sometimes, as kind of a history wonk, that's one of the cool things about looking at some of these old movies is you can see newer movies take pieces of it, and you feel the echoes of these older productions as you're watching newer movies. It almost feels like you're getting an education when you watch some of these, which makes them sound really boring. And that's sort of one of the hurdles that, like, if you're a parent and you want to introduce your kids to some of these films, how do you get over that boring barrier? I mean, is that something that is a real concern for parents who might want to turn on an old black and white movie and let their kids watch it?
First of all, I sort of take offense at that. I think black and white films are anything but boring. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is this, okay? Back when they were making films in like the 30s and 40s, which was a great, huge moment in black and white film. In fact, they were making more films during those 2 decades than they've ever made in any other decade. Mm-hmm. So, and in that period, it was under the Hays Code. And for people who don't know what the Hays Code was, it was essentially in the 20s, film work was getting rawer and all this nasty stuff was coming in, and the public said, wait, no, we don't want this. And then the government started getting involved, and then Hollywood said, okay, hold it. No, don't get the government involved. We will police ourselves. And they created this Hays Code. And the Hays Code essentially said, it cut out nasty, really foul language. It cut out drug use. It cut out extreme violence, that sort of stuff. But anyway, under this Hays Code, what it forced the film industry to do was to really work on, I think somebody already mentioned it, great stories, great ideas, great concepts. They had to be creative because, again, they were limited. They had these limits, and so they couldn't go out and just blow everything up or kill everybody. They had to think about ways that they get people involved and interested. And that's why these films are so creative and so interesting. If you actually get kids to sit down with you and get past the idea, the concept, like you were talking about, Caleb, of that, boy, black and white is boring. If you get them to actually watch it, they go, oh, wow, this is fun. There's something really interesting here. Yeah.
So, Caleb, do you agree with that? As a person who said, this could be pretty boring. Is it just a matter of sitting your kids down and saying, watch?
I really think so. I would say probably the first black and white movie I saw was Casablanca. That is a long movie. And so I was not thrilled when my parents were like, hey, we're going to watch this really long movie and it's not in color. But I didn't have a choice. I wanted to watch a movie. And, you're 30 minutes in and you're hooked. Because you're so invested in the characters. It's not just scene by scene, giant 30-minute fight scene, everything blows up, everybody dies, everybody's sad. There's so much more intricacies in the characters, in the plot, that it makes the movie more gripping. It makes the movie more like a book that you can't put down. Because it's so story-driven.
And like a book, sometimes you get to the end and say, man, I wish they could show me more of these characters.
Yeah. Another misconception, I think, about these old black and white movies. 2 misconceptions, actually. Number one, that they're completely clean because of the Hays Code. Right? When we're talking about these movies from a parenting perspective, these movies can come with some pretty serious problems as well. I was surprised, actually, as I was prepping for this podcast, looking at our reviews, and we have red on 2 of them for kids. So clearly these are movies
red being big problems.
Exactly. Cautionary elements for kids, right? There's a lot of violence in Seven Samurai. Obviously, To Kill a Mockingbird deals with some really difficult topics. And that's the other thing. I don't think I fully realized it until we started talking. every single one of these movies does not have necessarily that traditional Hollywood happy ending. There's some complexity, there's some gravity in all of these movies. And that's something that I think would take people by surprise, don't you?
I do. Well, think about, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily out of bounds.
Right.
There are times where you can have really difficult subjects and you can wrestle with really difficult subjects, and it's okay to let the kids in on that. It's just a matter, again, of discernment. Like everything else we do, we talk to parents about discernment. And that's why we're doing these films, too. Because in case they're thinking about stepping back and watching some of these classics, here are some things you can expect. And they might not know that because they might not have seen them themselves.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Mr. Hoos, because when I think about, especially To Kill a Mockingbird, and the very, very difficult topics that are there, when you think about the Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and sort of those issues of what is justice, check out the full review on pluggedin.com. But if you can navigate the movies, these can be kind of good conduits to help start discussions with your kids about these topics, don't you think?
Well, I think To Kill a Mockingbird is a great example. I think everything in my review, every content issue, every difficult topic, Scout and Jem in the movie witness. They see what goes on. They're in the court case. They're with Atticus at the prison when he's essentially guarding Tom Robinson's cell. Like, they see all these difficult topics, and they're asking Atticus questions. Why are people like this? Why do they think this way? Why is this a big problem?
Yeah.
And I think as a parent, you would be able to expect those same questions from your kids if they saw the same movie.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Just to reiterate, I mean, I remember watching To Kill a Mockingbird as a kid, and I totally identified from the perspective of Scout and Jem.
Yeah.
Watching this, all this is going on. What is Atticus doing? Why is he having to do this? This doesn't seem fair, you know? And coming at it from that perspective, I think really emphasizes it can be something, yes, supervised by parents. Parents need to be aware, but watching these things with your kids can really provide some insight and connection for kids to really start mulling over these big questions within the safe context of talking with you as the parent.
And when those characters are asking, why is this happening? They're not just asking Atticus, for example. They're asking us. They're asking us when we're watching, and we have to answer it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thanks, guys. I think that's a great place to land it. And now, a word for our sponsors. You.
Friends, are you tired of having too much money? Do you find that your cash and debit cards are weighing you down? Do you look at your bank statements and say, we need to get rid of some of this? Well, you're in luck. The Plugged In Show would be happy to take some of your unwanted, unneeded money. In fact, your generous donations allow us to keep doing what we're doing. But wait, there's more. Not only will we take your money, but we'll give you something for it. Yes, that's right. We'll give you a copy of our book, Becoming a Screen-Savvy Family. 275 pages of the finest wood pulp available, complete with words written in genuine ink. And the words themselves, priceless. Even though, hey, giving us a little money doesn't hurt. Go to the Plugged In Show homepage and find out how, for a gift of any amount, our book, that's right, the wood pulp, the ink, the priceless words, can be yours. And you won't have all that pesky cash weighing you down either. It's a win-win.
And now we're joined in the studio by our technology expert, Emily Chow, who's going to talk about some new features in Spotify that for some parents might be troubling. Hey, Emily.
Hey, Paul. It's not quite as catchy as, Ashley and Adam's.
No, it's not. It's not,
greeting,
but we'll take what we can get, right?
It's fine.
So first off, for those who aren't familiar with Spotify at all, can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
I mean, in a nutshell, it's a streaming platform for music and podcasts. So that's, the easiest description. You can listen to it on the web. You can listen to it on the app.
There's probably quite a few people listening to us on Spotify right now, right?
Exactly. And I think people like it because it's available on Apple and Android devices, not just one or the other. So it's cross-platform.
Yeah.
There you go. That's it.
So it's really interesting to me that Spotify is introducing these social media features.
So this is not the first time that Spotify has had social media features. There was a time where you could like direct message people, but they removed that. So these social media features are actually very limited at the moment. And that's the big thing, is that they were, in all the interviews that I read, they were being really vague about whether or not they would be expanding these features to their entire platform. But right now, the biggest feature is that if you are listening to this podcast on Spotify, if you go to the comments feature, there's a comments feature. Like just period. There is a comments feature. That is the new thing, is that if you are listening to a podcast on Spotify, you can leave a comment on it. And, you know, it's kind of cool in some ways, because if you're listening to a podcast and you're like, wow, this is great. I love this content. It's perfect for my family. And you go to the comments section, you know, you can write a little note, and, you know, that way the creators of the podcast are like, oh, yay, we're doing the right thing. Let's keep making more of that. But then the other thing that you can do is you can kind of like, perhaps somebody who also listens to this podcast is like, yeah, this is great. Here's another podcast you can listen to that's similar, you know, or you can just have conversations about the episode and such. So, you know, it could be a very positive community aspect. But as with any comments feature on any social media, you have to deal with the fact that, yes, there are going to be people who are maybe not so polite in the comments, who aren't up on their social media etiquette, as it were. And so I think that's kind of going to be the big thing there, is that you hope that people won't post mean or nasty things, and you hope that they won't post links to things that are maybe not so savory.
Inappropriate. And it seems like those inappropriate posts, that might be the inappropriate links might be the most troubling things if you're looking at how parents might think about this.
I think so. I think that if you're a parent, you just need to exercise a little bit of caution. Like, it's not, you know, oh my gosh, this is evil, and now Spotify is social media and we can't handle. No, it's nothing like that. It's not, you know, the worst thing in the world, but it is something where it's like, okay, this exists now. So when my kid is using Spotify, I got to keep in mind that the filters might not catch bad words in the comments. So I just need to keep an eye on that. Now, I'm pretty sure if they're using Spotify Kids, they don't have that comments feature yet. I'm pretty sure you have to be using the full version of Spotify. But all that to be said, most of your teenagers are not going to use Spotify Kids. Most teenagers are going to be using the full version of Spotify. So yeah, you just, like I said, it's just a little thing where you need to, you know, maybe exercise a little bit of caution, and also just keep your eyes and ears peeled in case they do decide to expand this further to make it a more, you know, social media-esque platform.
Because you could definitely see that they would be interested potentially in doing that, right?
Yeah, they've expressed interest, but they've been, like I said, the creators or, you know, whatever of Spotify, they're still holding their cards real close to their chest. They're just like, yeah, we're not sure what we're going to do. We could see it, but we're not sure, you know, very vague.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Why do you think that these creators, you know, these creators of these really popular platforms, why do they lean into these social media services? Because we're seeing this more and more, it seems like.
Well, at least in Spotify's case, it really does seem like they are actually creating this as a tool for content creators. So, you know, they already have Spotify Live, which is an entirely separate app altogether. But basically, that's where, you know, you can host a live podcast. You can host a live music session if you are a creator on that platform, and it allows you to interact directly with your fans. You know, and the comments feature on the podcasts is just another version of that. It's like now your fans can talk directly to you via the comments, you know, and whether or not creators are actually going to be responding to those comments is an entirely different beast altogether. But I think that right now it does seem like it's geared towards the content creators, where it's like, okay, we're trying to give you these tools so that you can figure out what your audience wants and tailor that experience a little bit more. But again, because it's a social media aspect, you get the entire internet in there.
Right.
And that's where the problem comes in. It's like you think you're opening a window, but you're actually opening the floodgates.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So to sum it up, really what we want people to take away from it is Spotify has these new social media features. They're fairly limited at this point in time, but it's another thing that parents are going to have to be aware of because of those floodgates.
Indeed.
Thanks so much, Em. All right, and now it's time to play a little game as we often do at the end of these shows. The title of the game is Name That Movie. And especially for Brett, I'm just going to explain how this works. What we do is we think of a movie. It's got to be a black and white movie today. Think of a sentence that might help the rest of us around the table guess what it is. But let's not make it too terribly obvious. So with that said, Mr. Hoos, you want to begin?
Sure. A very handsome, eternal bachelor meets the love of his life and gets married. But he can't go off on his honeymoon because of all the bodies at his relative's home.
I know this one.
Yes.
Arsenic and Old Lace.
Did you guys ever see it?
I've never seen it.
I've seen it as a play. They did
Oh,
the play
okay.
at my school.
Okay.
It is wonderful.
Yeah.
It is hilarious.
It is the Cary Grant version is so goofy. So in fact, it's so goofy that he hated it. Cary Grant said, "Oh, this is going to be a complete bomb," but he was wrong.
All right, Caleb, we're going to lean to you next.
All right. More than a few gentlemen discuss switchblades, baseball, and justice as humidity rises.
You look like you already know it. Go
I
for it.
do.
Yeah.
Tell him.
I do. And I'm really bitter because it was my movie.
I'm so sorry.
As it was mine.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
no!
Yeah, no.
Oh, no.
It was.
It's one of the best.
It is one of the best.
Sorry to
And
steal it.
It is
12 Angry Men.
Yep.
Wow.
It's a great one.
You guys all chose that one?
Well, I was thinking
It's-
no one's going to choose
It's one of my
12
favorite
Angry
movies
Men.
of all time.
It's great. It's fantastic.
really
Yeah.
good. Talk about a movie that has such richness and depth, and
Yeah.
all people do is literally talk.
They're just
In one room.
Yeah.
In
They're
one
just
room.
in one room.
You don't know their names, well, until the very, very end. But
Yeah. They just introduce themselves really briefly, right?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, it's
Incredible movie.
Peter Fonda, it's his best role, I think, by far.
Yeah.
All right.
I do have a backup.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm glad someone does.
That'll give you a moment to think about it.
Yeah. So I just in case. Okay. A famous actor's fortunes take a turn after a meet cute with a beautiful woman and the rise of the talkies.
Dancing in the Rain. No, that's not the name of it. Tap.
It's not singing
it's
in
not
the rain.
Singing in the Rain
right?
is not in black and
Singing in the
white.
Rain.
It's not Singing in the Rain. I tried to be a little
Dancing
tricky
in the
with
Rain.
this
Why
one.
did I think of that?
The Artist?
The Artist.
The Artist,
Which is
yes.
a black and white movie, but I think it came out in what?
Oh,
2012 or something
exactly.
like that.
It's a
that
more
seems-
recent
A
movie.
Okay.
black and white movie. So
Won like 3 bazillion Oscars.
Yes.
Shot in the style of
that's
an old
right.
movie.
It
Yes.
was a-
And that was
technically
a great
black and white
movie, too.
Yeah. That was really just so artistic. It was, well, it's named The Artist. So, of course, it was.
Not only was it black and white, it was silent. It was great.
Yeah. All right. So, here we go. On the fly. A washed-up writer shows up at a woman's house in the middle of a funeral for a monkey and stays for a good long while.
Funeral for a Monkey. That's the one that throws me.
Man.
And I hope I don't have that wrong. There is a monkey involved in it. The house that the writer shows up in is owned by a washed up actress. who was once a famous silent movie actress.
Oh, and she's ready for her close-up.
That is exactly right.
I'm stumped, so.
Oh, come on, you know it.
I
You
know it. Oh,
Takes place on a particular
okay.
boulevard.
Okay, so Sunset Boulevard. Okay, see, I haven't seen that one, and
you haven't?
I've heard
Oh,
of it,
okay.
but I didn't know if it was black and white or not. That
So
was
where
my
does
hesitation.
the monkey come into play?
So
See, I didn't
weirdly,
even remember the monkey.
Yeah, so my recollection, and see, this could be completely wrong, but my recollection is that he goes to this house and like she has this pet monkey or chimpanzee that died, and so they need to bury it, and that's sort of where the weirdness of the story begins.
See, I'd
So-
forgotten that.
Yeah, well, you always think of Gloria Swanson,
Yeah,
real life silent movie actress. Gloria Swanson plays this incredibly weird character. Sunset Boulevard might be one of my very favorite black and white movies, but it is. Speaking of dark, this is it.
All right, I have to check that out.
Oh, man. This has been such a fun conversation. Thank you guys so much
bet.
for
Yeah, thank
walking
you.
us through it. And thank you to the listeners for joining us today. And now we want you to join in the conversation. Do you enjoy old movies? Why? Why not? What's your favorite? Do you use Spotify, and how do you feel about their new social media features? Let us know on Instagram or Facebook, post a comment on our blog, leave a voicemail on the Plugged In Show homepage, or send us an email to team@thepluggedinshow.com. Thanks again so much for joining us. We really appreciate this time with you. Be sure to check us out next week around this same time, where we'll be looking at some really troubling TV shows now streaming. You won't want to miss that on the next Plugged In Show.
It's time to level up. Give your kids a safe, faith-focused, and biblically based community, and so much more. Join the Adventures in Odyssey Club. Club members get on-demand access to the exciting Adventures in Odyssey series, including more than 900 episodes. With faith-building activities, parental controls, and a safe online community, the Adventures in Odyssey Club could be your best adventure yet. Learn more and start your free trial at adventuresinodyssey.com/radio.